Anuraag has got it covered.
Next on Eternal Durdles.
Hello and welcome to the holiday season of Eternal Durdles. This December, we are celebrating the holiday season by posting a video every single weekday in December. That means 5 days worth of content every week. As you can imagine, that's a huge lift. It's basically like a second job for me at this point. So if you can support us by going to patreon.com/eternaldurdles, that would be much appreciated. As always, the show is free, but you can get ad-free content on Patreon. You also will get, starting January again, a bonus episode from us every week. And without further ado, I just wanted to thank everybody who's already a patron. And here's the show. Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zac Clark. And with me, as always, Phil Blechman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Zach, I'm so happy that we finally have someone on the cast who's going to agree with all of my takes. Anuraag, welcome to the cast.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
How's it going, Anuraag? So we've got you here this week, specifically this week, because you're coming hot off of coverage for Eternal Weekend, and one, we wanted to pay homage to the fact that you've been doing the yeoman's work to make sure that everyone who doesn't attend these things gets to enjoy them. But on top of that, I kind of wanted to dig into what it takes. You're there, and you've been doing this for at least 3 years, if not much longer, for Eternal Weekend. So I just wanted to kind of give people a little insight into your process. Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield.com. Moxfield is the best deck building website on the internet. You can find all of my and Phil's decks in links below, including decks from this episode. And if you do, you'll be directly supporting the channel.
Yeah, I mean, oh man, I don't even know where to start because there's so much to think about here. I guess the first thing, is time. A lot of time. I think I put maybe at least 100 hours into preparing for this weekend because I took a look at the kind of content that I was outputting and said I could take it to the next level. So that's 100 hours there. And then the weekend of, it's 12 hours on Thursday, 12 hours on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That's 50 hours at least. So a lot of time. And I guess just some sort of sick obsession with wanting to really deliver this. Okay, it's not a sick obsession, but it's I don't know. I can't really describe the sort of words to talk about this
a compulsion, you might say.
Yeah, that even that I feel is I'm on 11 out of 10. You know what I mean? It's filling his basic lands. He's got to play them. He's got to. I've got to be there doing coverage. So it's what it is.
I want to ask about that because I think that's something that we've had you on the pod before, and talking about the kind of coverage that you do and the actual what are you doing and how are you doing it. But we don't talk about the opportunity cost to you, dude. Anybody who wants to search the archives can pull out when Anuraag is playing win-ins at SEGs, and he's 11-2, and he's spinning some tops, and he's crushing some folk. And when you're doing coverage, you don't get to play in these events because you're making sure that everybody who's watching from home actually gets to watch. Do you ever have the itch? Do you ever feel man, I feel the need to do coverage. People expect me now to put on the high quality content that I put on, but I also want to show people that I still got it.
Before you answer this, Anuraag, I want to, because this is unprompted by Phil. We had this discussion, the sacrifice that you make. We had this discussion in chat, and I said, I was like, hey, if we were doing this, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Phil and I are trash, but my exact quote was, one of us has a 1 of 4 brainstorm. The other one of us has a L5R sword. We are not the same.
Badass. Hey, whoa. Let's not sell that sword short. I
didn't win that. I traded in a bunch of Kool-Aid points for it. So it's not the same thing at all.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of costs otherwise. Even before I get into playing Magic, it's my son was recently born 5 months ago. Even taking a weekend off is it's a heavy toll. Yeah. It's financially, it's also just a lot. You have to hire extra help or whatever it is to make sure that my wife isn't drowning in responsibilities and duties. Like that's just like one bucket right there. But then, you know, going into like actually playing Magic, I watch all these matches, and like especially when we get into the top cut, it's just like, yo, if I was in there right now, I'd be it'd be over. I would have won. You know what I'm saying? But also it's just like I have spent a lot of time kind of analyzing my relationship with the game and where I'm at right now. And for me, I've sort of come to the conclusion that like I don't get the same joy out of, you know, crushing tournaments. Okay, that's also kind of an overstatement, guys. I spiked one event, like that's really just it, right? I'm washed. I'll be honest with you. But like playing in these events is like it's like I think I like turned the page. I'm in this other chapter now where it's like, okay, how can I give the same, like, you know, like when you woke up on Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings for us, yeah, and it's like, all right, like 8 a.m., 9 a.m., round one of Legacy at a Star City Games event. You're locked in for the whole day, watching all the crazy decks that might be out there, and you're just like, this is great, you know? Let me get my cereal and things like that. That kind of experience, I think, that's sort of like where I'm at right now with Magic. Is like that's what I want to give to people. Even with like streaming, it's just like I'm messing around. I'm not like, you know, dying to win. If I win, that's cool. That's great. Don't get me wrong. But like that's never like the goal anymore. I never really had aspirations for the Pro Tour. Like I looked at it one time and I was like, this is great, but because you could never really get in through Legacy, I was like, whatever. And I think that kind of helps with like, you know, realizing where I'm at, what I want to be doing. I think there's a lot to Magic besides just playing. And that's kind of where I am right now. Not to say that I don't like playing the game, but just like coverage is like something else. Like it's like at this point I've poured like 3 full years into creating this, and I want to see it through. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think we really could just like take it to like the nth level, whatever that might be. And I want to be there. I want to push it forward.
Yeah, it's wild the amount of back knowledge you need to get into this as well. You know, beyond, you know, like I'm going to make the sacrifice to not play and to get the coverage, but you know, like this isn't something you just pick up and you're just like, hey, I'm just going to like immediately be great at this. I'm going to do this thing, you know, and you've got all this hired help. You know, correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't got a chance to even look at it because we're trying to get all this coverage together. You had like Reed doing coverage. You had all these people doing coverage in the background, and like all those organizational skills, like the project manager side of it, and all of the technical knowledge that you just need to like know for video. Like all of that stuff is just like backloaded as far as what you need to even get started with this stuff.
Yeah, generally speaking, like where I am at now, it's like the intersection of like 7 different jobs. Like you mentioned one, right? Like management is a big deal. You know, when I talk to Card Titan, they're like, hey, we know you can handle this. It's all you. If you have any questions, ask us. And at that point, it's like an end-to-end service almost where I'm like, all right, well, you know, we're going to start at noon and we're going to finish at 9 p.m. What is every single thing that has to happen? So like you mentioned, management for requirements gathering, understanding like, you know, what it's like to be in the commentator side of things, what they're saying, what could be helpful, what I need to provide to them in order for them to do their job successfully, you know, what it is for the players to be in an environment where, you know, they don't feel like like this time around. One thing we did was like we added more lights to the setting to make things like pop, to look fresh. One of the players was like, hey, you know, I think I got a headache from this. Can you do something about it? And like, you know, getting those feedback loops and things like that to make sure that it's an environment that's okay for them. Talking to Card Titan, talking to the rest of the production team, you know, Jeff Foster, amazing, you know, Richard Trung, amazing. It's a lot. And I think, I mean, there's also just like the literally knowing how to set up an OBS stack. I had to talk to literal developers for the software and plugins to like learn how to use them properly so that I could create sweet animations, you know, that make Magic look good. And beyond that too, I could keep going, right? Like I've self-taught myself, you know, like After Effects and Photoshop and Premiere Pro so that I can create like snazzy transitions that are like specific to Magic the Gathering, right? You're not going to find this stuff online. and then just talking to people, getting ideas, figuring out what works. There's a lot. I mean, there's so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
The notion of we might be desensitized to it because it's an expectation, but like the idea of you tacking on person cams, like additional cameras that are on the person when they're like sideboarding or whatever, so you can actually see faces. I forget how long ago it was, but I remember when you were talking about how you would love to add that to coverage, and it's just like the amount of work and volume and like the additional workload on your end to travel all that stuff to be able to have it, particularly for Eternal Weekend. I think that like one thing that we don't quite comprehend because it's just so embedded in like, you know, the experience that you're trying to deliver is seamless, and it's sort of like what, you know, they say good sound design in a movie is if you don't notice the sound. You know, it's like that kind of like when the quality is good enough, you just don't realize how good it is because it's just, like everything is so seamless. And so like I think that like one of the reasons why we as a community also think that Eternal Weekend is like the creme de la creme of like our format now, like whether we fully grasp it or not, is because of the quality of the coverage that we get on it, and then those videos live forever, you know. So essentially what I want to get to is to ask is, you've been working on all this and everything that you've been aspired to do with coverage, but like, do you also grasp the idea that like you are the historian, like you're the archivist that's like cataloging the fact that like when we're talking about like when Vexing Bobble gets banned in 2 weeks, right? Like we're going to go back to the top 8, and the reason that we have access to the film on the top 8 is you. Does that I don't know if that like resonates in a way that like is meaningful, but like, do you realize that the stamp of like for years to come, when we look back and think like, oh yeah, what was Vexing Bobble's heyday that caused it to get banned? It's that top 8 where 3 Mystic Forge got in, and the only reason we have that footage is Anuraag Das.
I think it's very impactful to, I mean, like you mentioned, right? Like these kind of events, there's so much. Every single event that's like, you know, like in this case, I think there was like a $50,000 prize pool, the promo cards, right? It's like once a year kind of deal. These are impactful. There are a lot of stories to be told. You know, Magic is always constantly changing. And in a world where we don't have coverage, you're right. We lose like, you know, that pin in time. You know, we lose the meaningful takeaways from that kind of stuff. And I don't know. I just feel like, I mean, I don't necessarily like look at myself as like, oh yeah, you know, like you put it really nicely, like the archivist, right? I just kind of feel like I'm just doing my part for the community, you know, giving back to a subset of amazing people, you know, that I have spent the last decade with, and it's like I feel like it's like the least I could do for all the amazingness that they are, you know. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's cool if you think about it, right? It's like, wow, we got to document this point in time. It is really cool. Yeah, when you say it like that.
You're basically the Indiana Jones of Legacy is really what it comes down to. We need to get you a nice leather fedora, you know.
I don't think
maybe a whip.
Me in a fedora. Phil, what do you think?
I think if you're walking around the convention hall as the lone person in a fedora, as the you know, way that people can spot you from afar, you know, because the other thing, like anybody who's listening who wasn't able to go to Eternal Weekend, like Zach and I were there all 4 days. Anuraag was in the same room that we were in.
I didn't see him
because he was in the corner behind the thing doing coverage. Like he did not have time to like get up from his screen to really.
Dude, there's
like,
a sick photo. One sec. Okay, I gotta show you this sick photo. I'll send it in just a sec. But yeah, it's basically like the way it works nowadays is I get stuck behind like a screen, and I just sit there. It's like my little zone. I'm a little goblin. I'm a little gremlin, and I just go to work. Here, Zach, I've sent it to you right now. This is what
we'll add
looks
it up
like.
there.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a way to
sure
to
is.
share it. But yeah, I'm like behind a banner, and it's like the control center almost, right? But I literally like I can't get up to go. Like, okay, I mean maybe this is TMI, but there was like it was round 4, and I had to run to the bathroom, and I just couldn't, because like I was like almost shackled to my area, and I had to wait like 6 hours till the end of the day before I was like, finally, yes, I'm allowed to leave, you know, that kind of thing. But I mean, don't get me wrong, I want to be there because everything that's going on is super cool, and I absolutely love it. It's just like it's kind of funny to think about like what it requires to like do the job the weekend of. That's one of those unspoken costs. Yeah, can't really leave my 5x5 area until it's time.
Anuraag, I have a couple questions about the future, right? So, what you're doing now is obviously excellent, but, I find, in that world of content creation, you're always your biggest critic. What would you change? What would you add? Like, is there, you've got wish list stuff in your head, I'm sure, about like how you could improve upon this stuff. What do you think it would be? Given the unlimited budget,
Wow, that's so crazy that you asked because I have like a list right here.
There it is.
Of things
of course.
that I plan to work on.
Is it crazy, or is that just the world that we live in? Like we spin our wheels thinking about ways to make these things better, right?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, and I'm pretty sure this is just endemic to very like just Magic players anywhere, right? Where you always want to do better, where you always want to like win the next game or the next matchup, right? Like that competitive nature. It trickles down into this for sure. And I look at everything and I'm just like, okay, procedurally, like what could have been better, right? What could have made this experience better? What could have like, and this is something I don't really talk about, but I realized like at the end of my first year that to do this just for the sake of coverage is like not enough. You need to like morph it into something bigger, right? Like things like sustainability, like you have to treat it like a product. And eventually that's like what drove me to like turn this into sort of a business, to keep it so that, there is some sort of revenue flow in, which, admittedly that's very hard to do for a game like Magic, so that you can keep doing coverage because, doing coverage and then bleeding myself dry so then I can't do coverage later, that's not helping anybody, right? I mean, temporary in the short term it is, but anyways, so thinking about it like from that perspective, then it's like, okay, well, what is the next version that, I can market to a client and be like, hey, like, check it out. Now I have, automated, headers where we can put whatever you want in, like the names and the pictures and things like that. Like, or if you want to like brand certain logos like that, like always thinking like that. But then also thinking from like the player perspective where I'm like, okay, well, it's really annoying when, you as the player cannot tell immediately what one of the players has mulliganed to. So now I need to go back to my dev guy and be like, hey, like, all right, let's create a visual UI for saying, okay, well, this player has mulliganed to 4 so that the narratives make sense, so the stories are better told. There was a player, for example, who had mulliganed to 4, and 2 turns later when they conceded, everyone was so confused. It's like, what? Didn't play land? Like, is this person just bad? No, that's not the case. So always trying to figure out like how better to tell the story and how to continue to keep telling the story is it's always on my mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Coming up with those like little things that like just improve, like, you're always looking to figure out like what's the thing that like if I was watching this, I would say like, oh, this could make this better, is like one of the biggest parts of like any kind of content creation, obviously. But when you're delivering something this big, this impactful, like being able to go back and being like, okay, this is what I would do if I, next year kind of thing. There's lessons learned, as it were.
Yeah, polish, I think, is what separates like first place from everything else. Like to be the best. Like if you look at like that's also twofold. But like if you look at like the system that Wizards uses for the Pro Tour, every single thing is on the front end looks gorgeous. The back end is even more intricate, but also just like perfectly managed. Like I had the pleasure to see one of their run of shows once, and it went down to like every 10-second increment, like at 110 10 seconds, Maria, you're going to say this, then we're going to transition to the next slide but on the same topic, and then Monty, you're going to speak for 10 seconds, then the next slide, and then so on and so forth, right? And so like it's there's always room to improve in one way or the other. It's just
it's wild how far we've come since like the showdown in New York and like ESPN like 6 when like they had like football announcers doing Magic commentary that didn't know anything about the game.
Oh
You know,
my
like,
goodness! Yes.
what
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
Ernum Armageddon? You know, like it's wild how much has changed, and you know, like just figuring out like how to fill space and time in between rounds and stuff like that, and you know, shuffling, figuring out ways to like basically just make it dynamic to watch. Yeah, you know.
You made me think of something that I hadn't thought about before when it comes to the like of course since we left EW, the impending ban list in 2 weeks has been the thing that's been discussed like pretty ad nauseum, particularly with the 3 Mystic Forge combos in the top deck. And I don't want to like ask a leading question, so without any context around it, I'm just going to ask: were there any cards that you saw over the course for both Vintage and Legacy? You were glued to your screen the entire weekend. Were there any cards in particular that essentially stole the narrative of those stories that you were talking about trying to tell better? Like, would there be a story that was then disrupted because there was a card or cards or a synergy between cards that just sort of commandeered narratives continuously throughout the weekend?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. I think there's two things that I want to talk about. The first is just to bluntly answer your question, and I feel like there's maybe a little bit of bias going into these events. You really can feel the pressure of like people and what they want to watch and what their expectations are in the format. For example, anytime you put Blue Black Reanimator up, people are just like, I don't want to watch this, man. Another frog deck. Oh, okay, cool. When in reality, sometimes the games could be really interesting, but those kind of biases do trickle down into like what I think we should display. I mean, I didn't actually manage the feature matches particularly this time. I kind of passed that task off to Jeff Foster, but it's something you always think about. It's like what does the audience want to watch? And in that sense, it's almost also just like things like some of the stories get skewed. For example, though, like I think what was really interesting to me was like the absence of Psychic Frog, especially like in the top 8. That was something that I kind of wasn't prepared for, especially given how you know crazy the card actually is. But then like I haven't had a chance, but if you look at like the top 16 and the top 32, like what is the actual impact of Dimir Reanimator? And I'm sure it's terrifying. But that's the kind of story like when you get to the top 8, Reed and Riley, they're just like, all right, well, there's only one copy of Psychic Frog. What does that actually mean? Question mark. The second thing that I wanted to actually mention is that funny enough, even though like I'm technically like in the best seat in the house with access to every single piece of information, I don't actually watch the matches. Which is kind of strange because it's like right in front of me. But I just don't have I can't focus on the match because I've got like, 2 people in my ear. This ear is open and I'm talking to somebody else down over there. At the same time, I need to make sure that like every single source, like there's like maybe like, I don't know, like 20 pieces of information being thrown at me at all times. So it's just like, weirdly enough, despite being in the best seat, I get to watch next to no Magic.
Yeah, you're in like full Mojo world.
Yeah.
Like the Lawnmower Man, all the screens, like, yeah, of course.
Pretty much. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think, so looking there, I think the next thing I want to ask is, how do you fund all this stuff? Like, how is there a place people can go to support you?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think over the past 2 years, I've worked really hard in just trying to market myself a little bit better. It's strange because personally, I don't really think this is something like a cost that should be offset into the community. I think like TOs and other people who are running these events should front the costs of coverage, but coverage has always been expensive. I think one of the things that I like to do, like market myself as, is a cheaper all in one solution. Literally, I will bring 250 pounds of luggage, and I will set everything up. Just give me like a couple tables and a power plug and some internet. That's all you got to do. So I really do kind of try to focus on, making my value known to people who have the dollars and who are spending it. But otherwise, when it does come to talking to the crowd, I have, like things like Patreon, and I think I've migrated over to like Metafy now, which is like, that kind of stuff. It really does help a lot. But But at the end of the day, like I want to like look at this as a business and say like, hey, I'm going to talk to the entity that has money and not sort of like, put the burden on the people who are watching. Because at the end of the day, like it's really not, anyone's responsibility but the people that are up top running these tournaments.
Yeah. I agree with you on that, but at the same time, like sometimes, a little bit helps grease the wheel. So I want to make sure that people have, have those links and stuff like that in case, we can, anything that we can contribute, I think, as a channel. But then on top of that, like, I think the community feels that way too, is we're all better with your service. So, it's just one of those things where we want to make sure that, all those opportunities are available for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything that, like, players that come on camera, is there anything that you wish they did or didn't do? Actually, in the feature match area? Like, would you do, like, would you prefer if they were more expressive? Would you prefer if they reacted when things happened? Would you prefer if they didn't do any of that stuff when they do? Like, is there etiquette on camera that people, how would anybody know one way or the other?
I think generally speaking, most people are really good. I think naturally people will emote, and I think that's what makes coverage really exciting. Magic at the end of the day is not like the number one selling thing. It's the people that play the Magic that makes coverage so exciting, right? The personalities, the narratives, their stories. So sometimes you'll see like someone come in and then, for example, when Kelvin won, he went like, yes, and then he jumped out of his seat, right? I want to see that feeling of like, I worked hard. He started 0-1 and then won 13 matches in a row. Like, that's a great story.
Yeah,
right.
It's a great story.
That's what's really cool. I think if I had to like say what I actually would like, just be yourself. When you register your deck on Melee, please don't write a different name, and then also keep your hands where the hand cams can see them, because I love like pivoting to those moments to see like, okay, well, like, just tell the story a little bit better, those kind of things, right? Like that's it. Like, those are like minor gripes. It's fine. People do a great job. I think just being yourself is incredible. Adding the table mics to these tables, also you can sometimes like hear like when someone is like super personable and talkative, or sometimes you can feel when it's just like flick, 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 card snap, no talking, upkeep, okay, no talking, next step, like, things like that, right? Like where you can get the tenseness of the situation down. It's just like whatever's natural. Like there's nothing I would really ask for. People will just be themselves, and I think that's what we're trying to get, right?
I'd like to see a situation where we get like AR glasses where like you're looking at your hand and like it just like it's giving you the data on that end. So like everyone just gets in and puts on their like, head setup. We're not at a point in that technology where it's not just a giant pain in the butt, but like that would be like a really cool, like when you're just like looking up and you're like, okay, I'm gonna tap the lands. You can go like first person kind of.
If those glasses could also tell me the optimal line to play, that would be helpful.
It's funny that you mentioned AR, because about a year ago, like ChatGPT kind of just like incepted that idea into my head, and I mean, no comment yet.
Fair. Yeah,
we'll see. There's some cool stuff. I'm
great minds.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Anuraag, it's been a blast having you on, and I wanted to highlight the service you do to the community. And is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Anybody who plays Legacy, you guys are great. I wouldn't have started doing this if it wasn't for the community. That's really it. I mean, thank you too for hosting me as well.
Of course.
I love Legacy. That's what more can I say than that?
And we'll leave it there then. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for watching and have a good day. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help sustain the Legacy content ecosystem. Just subscribing to this channel goes a long way to reminding YouTube that people love and support this format. Now, if you really want to go the extra mile, you should think about supporting us through Patreon. Both the links for subscription and Patreon are right here. And if you're listening on an audio format, you can go to patreon.com/Eternal Durdles. Thanks so much for watching.